Hey everyone, it's Michael. I'm finding all kinds of home runs with the original Goosebumps series here recently. The other day I read Shocker on Shock Street. That completely surprised me. There's one I'm reading right now that I'll get to, I guess in the coming days, God willing, that I'll do a review on, that I think you guys are going to really be surprised by how good at least the first portion of the book was. But we'll get there when we get there. But I read a book yesterday that I finished this morning that really shocked me by how good it was, and how I'm surprised that most people don't talk about this particular book. I'm curious what the TV episode will be like too if I get a chance to watch that sometime soon. But this particular book is from the original Goosebumps series, the 62-book classic era. It is You Can't Scare Me. I wish after reading this that I had gotten the original cover. I thought I was going to get it, and apparently I messed up the way I ordered the book, so I didn't get the original cover. But I might go back and get the original cover. Same thing with Shocker on Shock Street. I loved both books so much. I think Shocker's a much better book than this. I think this is just under being as good as that. But You Can't Scare Me is really good too. I love this for very specific reasons that have to do with my personal taste, and we'll kind of build there throughout the review. But I think the first thing to kind of start this off with, I love the revenge-like attitude to this book. It doesn't feel like a lot of Goosebumps books that I know of personally as of right now. On my channel, I have 85 or so videos at the current moment, and yet they're not all book reviews. A lot of them can be like book hauls and TV episode reviews and all kinds of stuff out there. So if I had to guess off the top of my head, I'd probably say there's about 65 to 70 reviews, maybe, which is all the books that I've read so far. And yet, You Can't Scare Me rubbed me in a way that I don't think any Goosebumps book has rubbed me yet. Or possibly ever will, for that matter. You Can't Scare Me is kind of scary. I'm not gonna lie. This cover is not very great. I want the original, like I said, because the original is kind of pretty scary cover in my opinion. And yet, the premise and the story and the way this story is told are so effective. You know, it's one of those really big standouts for me, like Ghost Camp and like Goosebumps Most Wanted, or Goosebumps Wanted, The Haunted Mask, that it's so unique and so different that it surprises me that this is even a Goosebumps book at all, that this should have been probably something else. But it doesn't feel like most Goosebumps books, in my opinion, which is a great thing sometimes. Every once in a while you get a really refreshing read like this, or like Shocker on Shock Street, which both of these terrified me. So basically the story for You Can't Scare Me, if you haven't known what it's about, pretty much four kids, but mainly our main character, are sick of this really kind of up-nosed, chin up in the air kind of attituded girl that, her name is Courtney, and she's very much like a peaceable type person. She makes a lot of friends, she shows off a lot. She can, like, for example, she's one of the very few people on the planet who can, like, get bees to come over and just sit in the palm of her hand and just not sting her, just be friendly to them. If there's a big mean dog, she can befriend it. You know, she shows off a lot of this stuff, and she has issues with a lot of people, and nothing scares her. For whatever reason, nothing really honestly scares her, and that's what our four characters, mainly our main character named Eddie, notice about her. And Eddie, like I said, the main character, kind of gets in this place where he's like, you know what, I want to deliberately do mean stuff to this girl, just to bother her, and just to try to genuinely scare her. In a lot of ways, it's kind of the same feeling that Carrie gives you by Stephen King. If you've read Carrie, then you know what I'm talking about. If you've seen the films of Carrie, you know what I'm talking about. Just this attitude to want to be mean to someone else, just because they're who they are, you know? And it works so well. I didn't know how this story could totally play out. And even the cover itself, I don't think should have the monster or monsters on it. They're important to the story, especially the finale of the story, but not so much what the story's theme is. The big portion of the book is not having to do with these things. They're just kind of a background idea. But the idea to keep just genuinely trying to scare somebody over and over again throughout the book is mainly our focus for the whole story, and it's really fascinating. There is a scene involving a spider, a tarantula to be specific. I hate bugs. I hate fish, I hate frogs, I hate all that stuff. But spiders, big spiders, like tarantulas, horrify me. The idea of even having to encounter a tarantula. If I saw a tarantula on my floor right now, I'd cry. I would cry on camera, I'd scream, and I'd be running. There's no getting around it. I hate tarantulas. I hate every kind of spider. But at one point, just one way of describing the tarantula that R.L. Stine described here, he talked about its body being warm, right? That immediately bothered me. I had never thought of a warm-bodied spider before. And then what happens with this spider in two different areas of the story are horrific. Some of the scariest, most uncomfortable stuff I've ever read in my life. And yet, there are people in the world like Stephen King and like so many people, Richard Lehman, so many horror writers that cannot make something more family-friendly like, but as effective at the same time as something like R.L. Stine's work here. This book bothered me in a lot of ways because of the kind of stuff in it, and it shocks me that this is not really high up on people's list for one of the best Goosebumps books, at least from the classic era for that matter. I really liked this a lot. I'd even dare say I loved it. I don't think it's the best thing ever from Goosebumps. I think it's pretty close, though. It's a pretty great book in a lot of ways. One of my favorite aspects of the story, after we get away from the portion talking about the kids just trying to scare this girl who doesn't really do anything to anybody. So, the idea of the creatures on the front, they're called mud monsters, right? And there's this whole lore based around them that I don't want to tell you about because it's so deep into the book, so much later on into the book. Like the last 20 pages of the book are where you find out what these things could possibly be, where this urban legend about these things comes from. I don't want to tell you anything about it because I love the lore. I love what these mud monsters possibly are if they exist. I love the urban legend feel to it. It's one of the very few things you don't see happen very often in Goosebumps. You have things like Ghost Camp, where there's like this rumor amongst kids that, hey, something deeper could be happening that happened years ago. There could be this entity out there that could be trying to kill us. Like, again, like Ghost Camp, same thing happened there. Same kind of urban legend texture to the story. This fear of whether something actually exists or not. That's not prominent in this story, but it kind of gets there throughout the book. And that's not a spoiler either, because you kind of just expect it. It's kind of predictable. But the idea of these mud monsters and the background surrounding them, the lore behind them, I love. I think it's some of the best Goosebumps lore ever made, up there with like Slappy's backstory. I just adore it. It's as good as the Haunted Mask background story, in my opinion. How the masks were created for those stories, in my opinion. This is such a good book. It really is, and I love that urban legend feel to it. And I love how that becomes so involved in the story. I love how our main character, Eddie, his older brother, I think his name is Kevin, is making a monster movie, a horror movie, just in general, based around the Mud Monsters legend in their town, out in the woods, right? There are so many things like that are just weird touches to the story that work amazingly for me, that I love. I don't know why, I just do. I like urban legend type stuff. I don't care if it's true or false. It doesn't matter to me. There are things, like groups and stuff that I follow on Facebook that I just like reading about urban legends, you know? I'm fascinated by this stuff. One of my favorite writers of all time is Alvin Schwartz, who wrote the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books that ended up becoming this new movie that's recently got released. I love how Alvin Schwartz had the same taste in folklore and stuff that I have. Folklore is fascinating stuff. If you like kind of stories of people like nowadays going on like Craigslist and having a horrible, terrifying, horrific experience there and stuff, if you like that kind of thing, that's kind of an urban legend folklore type thing. I dig that kind of stuff, and this book is so much up my alley. And if you're into that kind of thing, it'll be up your alley too. I think it could easily top a lot of people's favorites list if you're into that kind of material. Now with children, I think that You Can't Scare Me might be too scary for them, honestly. Like I said, same thing with Goosebumps wanted The Haunted Mask and Ghost Camp. Two of the scariest books I've ever read in my life, and this is one of them as well. You Can't Scare Me has a lot to offer. It's well written. The characters themselves are interesting. Like I said, you have the horrifying moments involving the tarantula are just beyond words. And like I said, the finale is impeccable. It is such a tense, powerful finale. I didn't expect that. I've wanted to read this book for a long time. I just didn't have the time to get across to getting a chance to reading it. And I had such a good time reading this. I'm really interested to see what the TV episode's going to be like. I have the TV book as well. I just can't see them messing this up. If Goosebumps, the TV show, pulls this off and does a really good, like, folklore feeling type episode, I'll be dumbfounded. I really will, because the show is very cheesy, very corny. It might actually end up feeling like the horror movie that the older brother in the story is making, instead of an actual, like, adaptation of a really scary story. But anyway, You Can't Scare Me is breathtaking. It is one of the scariest Goosebumps books, probably in like the top 5 scariest Goosebumps books I've ever read in my life. This is way up there for me. Again, the finale, I have to say though, is a small criticism for the book. The finale is not fantastic in the sense of being super satisfying to most readers, I would say. To me it was, because I love folklore. You don't always get a lot of closure with folklore. You don't get a whole lot of closure with this ending. And I think that might rub people the wrong way. That might be why this book is not as celebrated as certain books like Night of the Living Dummy and Haunted Mask. And yet, I love it. I genuinely love You Can't Scare Me. And it took me a lot of thought today to reach that conclusion that I think I love the book. It's just so different. Like I said, from most Goosebumps books that I've read, and that urban legend feel to it that Ghost Camp had is something that I find a huge highlight, something that I love when I see people do that. And R.L. Stine, of all people, doing it, that makes it even more special. I'll probably buy an original cover of this because it was so great. Anyway, You Can't Scare Me. If I had to rate this on a 5-star basis, I would easily give this a 5 out of 5. Again, I love it. I don't think it's as close to some of my other big 5 out of 5 reads like Ghost Camp and Little Comic Shop of Horrors. I love those for different reasons. But You Can't Scare Me, I'm shocked by how many people don't love this and adore this the way I do. I want my cousin to read this at some point. I'm going to recommend this to her at some point and tell her, like, you need to see this book. Like, you've got to get your hands on this and try this out, just to see what she was thinking. She's a big folklore and urban legend person like myself, too. I just want to experiment with that and see what she thinks. Maybe I'll update you guys at some point. I don't know. But anyway, what are your thoughts on You Can't Scare Me, guys? Put your thoughts in comments down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say about the book itself. I thought even the pacing was great here. This book really surprised me. It's one of those really surprising books like Shocker on Shock Street that I did not expect to adore it and enjoy it as much as I do. I love when I get books like this because I don't read the back of these books. I don't really know much about them when I go into them. And when I get a really surprising one like this or Shocker on Shock Street or Goosebumps Live on Stage, Screams in the Night, it's a really nice, pleasant surprise. After the hardness of working a job and everything else and then coming home and having a really good story to read, that's a home run in life. It really is. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the book? Put them down below. Thank you so much for watching. Do you agree with my review? Do you disagree with my review? Put everything down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say, guys. 5 out of 5 from me. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.